We're with Vern Anderson here at Douglas Machine in Alexandria today. We're going to get some insight on the packaging industry and some of the key people that have developed an incredible industry in the Alexandria Lakes area. Vern, I'm going to give you an opportunity just to talk to the camera a little bit and give your thoughts on an industry you were a key player in and maybe some of the key people you've been fortunate enough to either employ or have as partners or financiers or whatever. Tell us about the packaging industry a little bit, Vern.
Well, I'm glad to be a part of the packaging industry in Alexandria. And probably my my experience probably goes back to 1960, where I had an opportunity to work for a packaging company in the Twin Cities.
Okay.
And with that start, I guess I felt like there's an opportunity to be in the packaging industry in Alexandria. And also back then, growing up in this area, wanting to move back to this area, and yet there was very little industry and very little opportunity. And so as I began to think about, what can we do in Alexandria, and getting involved in starting a business in Alexandria and creating jobs was really an important part of my life.
People will wonder a little bit, I didn't mean to interrupt you, what about your education background? Are you just one of those guys that see it and know how to do it, or what about training that way?
Well, I've had to learn the hard way. Made a lot of mistakes, and a few decisions were probably right, but lots of mistakes. And yet, if I think about my personal experience, it probably started as a young child, wanting to build things, and even breaking my dad's tools, and probably early on making it out of wood and breaking wood and so on. But as time went on and had the opportunity to work for a company in the Twin Cities, I just felt like there was an opportunity for myself to be in the packaging industry, even though at that time I probably didn't view it as packaging. I just looked at it as being able to build different types of equipment. And as I look at, jumping all over here, but looking at Alexandria, I think it's been really good for Alexandria. It's created a lot of jobs in Alexandria, and I just happen to be a part of that.
From the standpoint of when you left the city to come out here, did you kind of have a thought process, or did you have a particular customer you wanted to serve, or you just set up shop and went out and found the customers?
Well, this is kind of how Douglas got started. My cousin, who is 15 years older than I am, bought a small little shop in Alexandria and doing repair work and fixing things for farmers and people in the community. And his desire was eventually to be able to build some type of things and get a product going. And I was working in the Twin Cities, and I had an opportunity to look at a project for my wife's aunt. And she asked if that's something that we could do for the company I worked for. And my comment was, the company I work for probably won't take that on, but I saw an opportunity. So I started building this little piece of equipment in my garage in Minneapolis, and then I needed some parts machined, and so I brought those up to my cousin. My cousin said, "Boy, let's get something going and come join me." And so it took a little while to get things going, but after about a year and a half, we finally got a couple small little projects. A little project for Curtis Candy Company for accumulating candy bars or conveying candy bars. Got a couple other little projects going. And so in 1966, I moved up here and joined my cousin, and actually formed a corporation. My brother joined the corporation as a silent partner, who was going to join us about 3 years later when we finally got things going. And but early on, we not only opportunity to build some special machinery, but we still continued to build or fix farm equipment and things that were broken. It would come in a local bakery or a laundromat or whoever it might be. And so it didn't start really in full-time in the packaging industry until a few years later, when we finally got enough work to continue in the packaging machinery. And I remember an early comment that my cousin and I made when I first joined him. He said, "Wouldn't it be great if we could provide a job for maybe, say, 6, 7 people in this community?"
Amen.
And then look at where it is today. I mean, there's hundreds of people that have got jobs in the packaging industry.
As far as a key customer or a key thought process to really get the Douglas Machine and going, was there a particular turning point or a particular contract that suddenly took you from a machine shop that did a little bit of everything to a true packaging industry?
I would say that was over some period of time. And I worked with my cousin probably for about a year before we finally got a big enough job to move up here.
Okay.
And the first job that we got was big enough, was a job for DeSoto Chemical for accumulating cans of paint. And the job was big enough, and it was big enough actually we could not build it in that first little shop that was 24 by 48. And so we had to find a bigger facility. We moved to 1207 Broadway and had a little bigger facility there. And then in 1970 we were able to move out to the location we are at today.
Now, the industry local here, were you guys the one that brought competition in to start some of the other firms in the area, or employees leaving you? People will wonder about that, Vern.
Well, I guess in some sense we could say we could take credit for it because we created opportunity for others to get started.
Of course.
And I think competition can be healthy. I think it's also, as you look at competition, you begin to know where your niche is, and you also know how to work with your competition. And I believe today that we have a very healthy communication with our competitors, and I view our competition as being healthy for the community. It's created jobs. And I think the other thing is, you can focus more on your competition rather than focus more at what we are good at and what's good for our customers. And I remember what John Wooden, as a coach, said one time. He said, let's work at playing our best game. Let's not be focusing at how our competition is playing their game. Let's play our best game. And I think we've learned to do that. And I think also we've learned to work with our competitors. And I feel like we have a good relationship with other people in this community.
Now, one of the things that makes an industry grow is good employees. At what point in time did you and your cousins see the need that we need some engineers or the next level? What point in time did that happen, and what motivated that?
Well, I would say early on, neither my cousin or myself had a college degree.
That's what I was wondering.
And my brother joined us 3 years later, and he did not have a college degree either.
Okay.
But I think we had a desire to build equipment and good equipment, and I think we were creative in our thinking of how to do that. But I would say probably after we got going, a few years, we began to look for mechanical engineers. We looked for electrical engineers, and today. It's not all degreed people that we hire, but depending on what that job is. Some jobs require that.
Yeah, and insight, obviously you have people with real insight, yourself had it. From a standpoint of a particular line, how many lines of product and packaging do you guys do from this start here?
Well, that's a tough one to answer because in the packaging industry, there's lots of different lines. And we view the packaging industry as we're in secondary packaging.
Okay.
Meaning that we normally take a product that's already in a container.
Okay.
Primary packaging would be handling the raw material, and such as putting product into a can and then sealing the can up. And we take the can once it's already in a can, or a carton once it's already in the carton, and take that carton or that can and put it into a case or a tray or shrink wrapping. And even in the secondary packaging, it's really a very fragmented business. We probably have maybe 6 major lines that we would think are our major lines. But there's a lot of specialties in the packaging industry. And I think that's what's created opportunities for so many people.
Successful people like you and Douglas Machine here in the packaging industry, when did you grasp the concept of how to charge for your expertise? How long did that take, Vern?
Well, I can remember early on when we first started the business, we kind of established that we needed to have a $6 an hour rate for our operation. That was kind of our goal.
Okay.
Well, you can well see we have a lot of inflation since then.
Exactly.
And I think as you gain experience, you begin to understand how long it takes to do a certain type of job. And I'm sure for the other packaging companies as well, that they have somewhat of a building block, that they believe this part costs so much and this system costs so much. And I think we've gotten a lot better at it. And I can remember early on where we would do a project or take on a project, and sometimes we did quite well, sometimes we did not do so well, and sometimes we did very poorly. And way back early on, when we first started, it was kind of like you're going to make money on a third of them, and a third of them you break even on, and a third of them you lose money. Well, over time, hopefully you get better than that. And I think we have a much better system today when it comes to pricing, what it costs to do something. And we continue to learn. We're still learning.
And from a standpoint of what percentage of your business today and the volume of business you do comes from customers now coming to the Alexandria Lakes area to your company or one of the other packaging companies and says, here's my problem, Vern, how do you solve it for us, compared to you sending your sales staff out of engineers to a particular company that you know is involved in structure and automation, I call it. Thoughts that way?
Okay, I'll come back to that one. I may back up just a little bit.
Okay, fine.
When we first started, the name Douglas came from Douglas County.
Okay.
And we wore many hats. And when I was wearing a sales hat, we'd go out and make a sales call and say, well, who's Douglas? I've never heard of Douglas before. So early on, I was trying to convince them that we were capable of building equipment.
Okay.
And so over time, eventually, of course, the Douglas name became more popular with our potential customers. And so today, I would say a lot of customers recognize the name Douglas. And so if they have an inquiry or something that they're interested in, they may contact us directly or through one of our salespeople. They will say, yeah, we got a project that we'd like to have Douglas look at. So our name today is much more common than it would have been when we first started.
And then, so originally, because there'll be people watching this of young people that think, oh, I should go out on my own and all these things. Give us some understanding about that concept in your mind and your partners now after being successful for a lifetime.
Well, I think, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that love to get something started. And maybe there's a few things that, one is you need to believe in what you're going to do or you're doing. And I think you need to be patient because it always takes a lot longer than you think. And it's probably not quite as easy as you think. And unfortunately, through the mistakes, you probably learn the most. When you do things right, there's probably not a lot of learning that happens. And we've had, people have left the company through the years and wanted to start something on their own. And if they want to do that, surely we want to encourage them. At the same time, it doesn't always work. Matter of fact, I think the success rate of companies that start and fail, they generally fail within the first several years. Mm-hmm. But if they really believe in what they're doing and get enough persistence and are willing to hang in there long enough, I think that's where success comes. And if success comes too easy, it generally doesn't last. And I think if you have to build a good foundation to stand on, it takes time.
In a typical packaging situation now, are you putting out today more just better packaging equipment for your old customers? What percentage now is your company and the industry in the Alexandria area involves? What percentage is it old customers with compared to new customers and insight that way, Vern?
Well, we believe very strongly that gaining a customer and keeping a customer is extremely important. So when we do get a customer, we want to do everything we can to continue to give them a good product. Now, at the same time, to grow, you do need to look for new customers at the same time. So I would say, in our business, and this is maybe a quick guess, but I would say probably 80 to 90% are customers that we worked with before, and maybe 5 to 10% might be new customers. And even though they might be existing customers, doesn't mean that they buy everything from us. They may still buy from some of our competitors, and yeah, we still compete on prices, and yet there are some key customers that they just say Douglas and they're going to buy a Douglas.
People today hear China, Mexico, Japan, Europe. How much of the packaging product do you make here goes overseas?
Not very much. I think the most we ever shipped international was probably in about, I'm going to say mid-1990s. And it peaked out at maybe 20% that went international. And I would say today it's probably, if I said international, that included Mexico and Canada, it may be 10% at the most. Most of our customers are U.S. One of the things that I like to mention is that most of our sales are outside of the state of Minnesota. So we collect the money from other states and other countries, and we build equipment here. So our money is deposited here, circulates several times before it leaves the community. Versus other businesses, they buy a product and it might go to Detroit, it might go to other parts of the country. Where I believe it's good for our community because we collect the money in other states and it circulates here. And other countries as well.
Very much so. And from a standpoint of the packaging industry, we hear robotics, we hear the common guy here. The kind of process you're doing to be a secondary packaging, do you see that continuing, or is there something on the horizon through either one of your new employees or one of your competitors that, wow, we as old-timers in this industry just never thought of it, doing it that way? Any thoughts that way, Vern?
Well, maybe backing up, when Douglas first started, it was pretty much mechanical.
Okay.
Today the equipment is pretty much electronically controlled, so much more robotic, and I see that continuing to grow. And we're doing things today that we could not have done before robotics were in, or servo controls. And I think that's a continuous process that is going to continue to change. Also, I think the demands of higher speeds, I think, are continuing to be a challenge. I think the companies like the Walmart that want to pack the Walmart way, so what Walmart wants, Walmart gets. And I think that's created both opportunity and challenges for all of us. So I think when new ways to package comes out, I think we got to look at that as an opportunity. If everything was packaged the same way, we wouldn't have a job. So it's good that there's creativity. I think even in the marketing side of things, our customers are looking at ways to market their product to get more opportunity, to get a bigger share of their market, which also creates an opportunity for us. So in the opportunity, creates challenges along at the same time.
And so from your standpoint, you're like me, you're no kid. What kind of transition process at some point in time when you decide I'm going to spend more time with my family, friends, or fishing or hunting? What kind of transition view do you look at with an employee-owned company?
Well, I guess first of all, I've been with the company more than 50 years, and it's part of your life. But at the same time, yeah, I'm looking for a transition. And so about 2 years ago, John Blue became the president.
Okay.
And about 2 years ago, he became the CEO. Now, Douglas is owned by a holding company called Kingdom Enterprises, and I'm the chairman of Kingdom Enterprises, which is where the board's at, and also, I guess you could say, the CEO of Kingdom Enterprises. It allows me to stay involved, but not in the day-to-day details. So I think a lot of the transition has already been made. If I were to walk away tomorrow, I think the company is very healthy. Yet at the same time, I love this business, and I'm not quite ready to walk away totally from it. And so today my job is, I enjoy my job, and yet I don't have to be here every day for everything we're working on.
Now, one of the things that you said early on about your business here in the packaging industry is you had to get out and stomp the pavement, so to speak. Now, today, your company here is right on the north side is the Alexandria Chandler Field, the airport, and I see jets coming in here, business jets on a regular basis. Do a lot of your customers come in today by business jet? Or do you send people out on business jets in our modern era, or is that some of the other businesses in the area?
Well, that's changed quite a bit. I would say if you went back probably 20 years ago, there was a lot of our customers that would fly in here. And I can remember having as many as 4 planes in one day from customers. Where I think today that travel has changed just a little bit. You know, there's occasionally we will charter a plane out of here, but most of the time we'll fly out of the Twin Cities, and we have a lot of service techs that are traveling all the time. And we have a lot of service techs that are located in different parts of the country. But I would say it can be as many as 50 people that are traveling from Douglas every day someplace.
Okay.
And that could be sales, could be service techs, could be other people.
When people, and I've known some of your service tech people, when they go out, is first and foremost, do they always go with a new machine, or is there issues that come up with older machines that you need to send a tech to? Give us a little thought that way so we understand packaging better.
Well, it's both. With new equipment, you'll send out a service tech or an installation crew to help get the machine going. But with all the equipment we have all over the nation, we have service techs that are servicing equipment that might have been in operation for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. And we have service techs located, I'm not sure how many, but many different states throughout the United States. And so there's an ongoing business just servicing the equipment that's been built over the past many years.
And from a standpoint then of machines, is it focusing today on faster, or back to what you said, they want it the Walmart way, or the retailer wants that packaging a certain way? And what point in time does packaging have its limitations as far as speed and efficiency, so it's not breaking a product?
You know, that's really a good question, because what we used to think was fast 30 years ago is pretty slow today.
Exactly.
And so you look at beverage lines, I mean, they're going faster all the time. And I think there's also some customers that are looking at much more flexibility, where if this product changes, can they convert to another product? So it isn't always faster, but sometimes it's the flexibility. And they don't want to just replace a piece of equipment because that product line is no longer in existence. They'd like to have the flexibility so that piece of equipment can be converted. And a fair part of our business is taking equipment that's maybe been operating for 10, 20, 30 years and refurbishing that to run a different product. And even occasionally we'll find out that piece of equipment got sold to some other customer, and they come back and say, we bought a case packer, it's a Douglas, and we want to run a different product on it. And so that continues to grow, and I suppose the longer we've been in business, the more opportunities we see along with that as well.
What about every business has some peaks and valleys, or a certain trend gets developed so it plateaus, and then maybe even it drops down? Your history since 1966 in the packaging industry, give us some insight that way, where you leveled off, or have you constantly been going up the ladder?
Well, it would be nice to say they were always going up, but that's not the case. Surely, we've had years where our business has been down, and surely we've had very challenging years. And saying that, I believe that in spite of that, a lot of learning came out of that. But I believe God has blessed us even in the trying times.
Surely.
And we've had several good growth years, and then we'll have a flat year, and sometimes a down year. And we can't control the overall economy.
For example, when the economic crash of 2008 and 2009 that everybody is well aware, how did that affect the packaging industry?
I think it affected it some. One of the things that is probably neat and yet challenging about the packaging industry, generally the cycle time is probably about 6 months. So you're going to normally have about a 6-month backlog. Now, at times you may have more than that. At times it could be slightly less than that, but probably on average about 6 months. And if I remember right, we had a pretty good backlog going into 1998 that carried us probably through 1998. But we've probably seen some of the downturn in 1999 and probably 2000. And the turnarounds seem like they're slower in this business, and yet when it starts to slow down, it may be just a little bit slower or turning down, where other businesses turn down quicker.
So in the area here, what do you view as your competitors in this Alexandria Lakes area? Can you mention their names? I'll probably screw them up. You must know them, Vern.
Well, maybe there's a couple different types of competitors.
Okay.
One is there's really probably a job shortage. In other words, there's more jobs available than there are good employees for those jobs. And so machinists, we're looking for machinists, we're looking for welders, and I think there's a lot of companies that are not necessarily in packaging that need a machinist, need welders, and so on. So that's a little bit, you could say it's a little bit of the competition, just that it's a place where everybody's looking for good people. Now, when it comes to competitors, the ones I guess I could quickly name is, Brenton Engineering, been around for quite a few years, and yet I think they've got somewhat of their niche of what they do and they're good at. And surely there's times we compete, but there's many times we don't compete. Agard, which is just down the street, and we compete sometimes, but I would say there's many times we don't compete. We may have the same customer, but maybe a different product for that customer. Massman, down the road in Villard, and Burl Massman actually worked here many years ago and started his own business, did a very good job. Today it's owned by Jeff Bigger in a holding company. Jeff worked here many years ago. And I feel like we have a good relationship with all of them. And matter of fact, we do metal finishing for Brenton Engineering, for Aspen, for Agard. We do some painting for them in our metal finishing facilities. And I think that was one of the things early on that we've tried to establish. How can we be good for the community in recognizing that, yeah, sometimes we will compete. There's a place in Fergus Falls owned by actually Barry Waymiller at this point. With Thiele Engineering, I think is the name on the facilities today. We don't really view them as a competitor, although I suppose there's times we could compete with them. But there's other competitors in the state of Minnesota as well. And surely outside of Minnesota, there's a number of competitors. In some of our product lines, our competition is probably more Europe. Probably Germany and Italy is probably a fair amount of our competitors. So it varies on which your product line is. In that product line, we probably don't have any competitors in Alexandria, and that's in our contour line.
What about in the United States when it comes to packaging? How important is the Alexandria area and the companies you just mentioned to various companies that need specialized secondary packaging? Is there another city? Is it Cincinnati, or is it some little town in Nebraska or Oklahoma? Or what about that, Vern?
I think it's interesting when you think about how things get started in different communities, and then you have some break-offs, and you get more of that in different communities. And I would say that's probably true with some other communities as well. There's several packaging companies in the Twin Cities as well. And I'm assuming that some of our customers, if they're coming to the Twin Cities, flying in, and they say, we can visit a couple competitors or a couple people in the packaging industry. So that might be an advantage for our customer.
What is the real niche as far as success and financially in the packaging industry? Is it patents, or is it strictly people with vision that may not have an engineering degree like yourself, but just know how to cut that keyway and bend that piece and tweak it just a little bit? Talk about packaging and insight from individuals.
Well, the thing that's interesting about the packaging industry, it's allowing people to be creative in their ideas. And just because somebody's very creative and comes up with a patent, doesn't mean that they have a degree, but they've thought of a way to do something better or different. And yeah, we have a lot of patents.
That's what I was wondering about. You get like 100 or a couple thousand, you think, or?
Well, I wouldn't say it's in 1,000, but it could be in the hundreds. And there's lots of things you could patent, but one of our philosophies is we have to believe that the patent is unique enough and gives us an advantage that we can use that as a selling tool. And then secondly, we have to believe that if it is that good, we're willing to defend it, which is another different challenge.
Sure.
So you can get a patent, but then you've got to ask yourself, are you really willing to defend it? And I think of all the patents we've had, some have been extremely good and have led to a lot of business, and they are worth defending. There's been other patents that we have patented and found that after a short time that it really isn't worth keeping up our cost on that patent, and sometimes we'll drop that maintenance cost on a patent.
People will wondering, a successful person like yourself with a successful company here, what was something in your history that you look back and scratch your head, boy, we should have pursued that particular line, or that we're here today because we did this and everybody thought that customer or that machine process wasn't important?
Well, I think, there's probably all of those experiences that you can say, I wished I would have. I guess I believe fairly strongly that don't spend a lot of time looking back.
Exactly.
Only to learn from. And you got to be spending more of your effort looking forward. And surely, I think there's a few things that we've done and patented that look at it and said, boy, that was the right thing to do. And there's been a few we've probably looked at and said, we really should have patent that or maintain the maintenance cost on it. There's always going to be some of those. But again, like I said, looking forward is much more important than looking backwards.
Do you or your competitors here in the Alexandria area, do you tend to share some of the customers you work with, or is that a no-no? Or is, from a standpoint, was one particular customer that you think about in your career here that's really helped you get more customers and still here today, and you can just go, whew, I thank God that that company came through the door?
Well, I think you could say yes, that's true. We're glad that we got these certain customers that we feel like we've done a good job with. I think as far as sharing with our competitors on a project, that's probably a little bit harder to do. It'd be a nice wish if you could do that, but I think it's in our industry that becomes a little bit more difficult. And even to the point that if you were to share a situation like that, and we haven't with anybody in our community, but we have in the past done a couple of projects with other packaging companies in other states, and it can be a little bit challenging who's responsible for this and who isn't, and finger pointing probably would not be healthy for our ultimate customer. And
right down the road, your competitor Agard is putting on a major expansion. Are any of the other competitors or yourselves here, are you looking at any major expansion, at least building wise?
Well, we've had a a plan for a number of years to put an addition on for our machining area. And fortunately, we've been able to find sources for machining. We've been able to figure out how we can produce more out of our facilities. And so that project's been delayed, and really for a good reason. I'm sure at some point in time, yeah, there will be an expansion. I don't know when that will be, but at some point in time, I think there will be.
Are you doing more outsourcing of parts? You even mentioned that you were doing some things for some of your competitors, and we always hear the word outsourcing, where a particular company, big or small, is doing a particular portion of a packaging machine or a welding process or a bending process or a coating process or paint or galvanize or whatever. Any thoughts that way?
Well, we do outsource quite a bit right now, particularly in the machining area, a little bit in welding, but mostly in machining. And so far that's been quite successful. But of course, as the company continues to grow, you don't want to outsource too much. At the same time, I think there's some advantages of outsourcing, because if for some reason things got really slow, and one of the things that we don't want to have is ever have a layoff, and so we're trying to be as flexible as we can. If you outsource, I think that helps you to not have a layoff. We use a lot of temp help. I think that helps when you're really busy, and overtime. And surely our desire is that if we do have a downturn, like 2008 or whatever it might be, that all the employees that are part of this company will still continue to be employed and be fully employed.
One of the interesting things, and it's just not you, I think Alexandria Industry is doing it. You're doing some things with medical costs. Can you give us any insight? You've got your own kind of temporary clinic at all? Any thoughts on that? Or I'm sure you know the guys I'm talking about. There's two in town now that are exploring or actually providing for the last year or something to keep this monster called healthcare under control. Any thoughts, Vern?
Well, I think we've all heard that medical costs continue to go up, and surely, I think there was several reasons that we decided to start the Douglas Clinic. And probably the number one reason is to provide better health care for our employees. And by having our own clinic, we have a lot of our employees that were not normally going to a clinic for a physical or for a checkup or whatever, that now are going. And if we can have healthier employees, there's several things that come out of that. One, that surely that does help our costs overall.
Okay.
And it's a real benefit to our employees. Yeah, I'm excited about that, and Alec Industries and Douglas Machine, we started talking about this a few years ago, and initially we were looking at maybe we need a partner in doing this, and then we began to recognize there's enough benefits for each one of us to do this, and so we set up our clinic, and Alec Industries set up one as well, and I would say to this date it's been very successful. It's been a hit with our employees. The people that work at the clinic, they're excited about it because they feel like they're providing a service, and yet they're not working to a tight schedule, so that they can give that one that comes for whatever it is, they can give them ample time to really do a thorough physical, a thorough checkup, or whatever it might be. It's handy for our employees' children when they get shots before school starts, if they got a cold or whatever, rather than hesitating and going to a regular clinic and saying, well, that's going to cost a lot. I can go here and it doesn't cost me anything. So I think it's a tremendous benefit that I'm excited about.
I commend you, both of you guys, and I think it's brilliant. We have to do something to address this, and I can sense what you're saying is they kind of feel like they're getting their temperature taken from grandma or grandpa rather than this
Right.
big empire
Yeah.
and this huge building. Obviously, you're very kind with your time, and I could talk to you for an hour, as well as the people watching this video. Do you have some thoughts that I've talked too much, and I don't even know how our time level is, and what you feel comfortable, but when we've talked here more and back to the industry and automation, in our society. What's your thoughts that way?
Well, I maybe this may not be exactly answering your question, but I really think we're living in a great community. Alexandria is a great community.
Amen.
It doesn't mean that we're perfect, but I believe we are a very blessed community. And several times we've said, if it wasn't for Douglas or for the packaging companies in Alexandria, we probably wouldn't have a Walmart, we probably wouldn't have a Target, we probably wouldn't have the hospital we've got. So I think we've contributed a lot to this community, to helping provide good jobs and creating a healthy community. And I know I have lots of people that come up and say, something special about Alexandria. And yeah, I think it is. Of course, I live here, I may be prejudiced, but I think Alexandria is a pretty special community.
As far as bring talented people or tapping talented visionary people that went to the high schools or are from Minnesota, North or South Dakota, and regionally, how important is the lakes, the golf courses, the natural kind of things that we have compared to the airport that we already talked about? And what about the freeway coming to town here? What kind of impact for the packaging industry as well as Douglas Machine do you think that freeway system has had for you?
Well, I think the freeway was a big part of it. It's sure a lot easier to get here with a freeway than without a freeway. So I would say also just the the lakes area, the school system, the hospital, the medical. I think Alexandria's got a lot to offer. And when we look at hiring people from another community to come here, we want them to come here because they want to live here. If we were just trying to get somebody to come here, but they really didn't want to live here, that's not who we're looking for. And we want them to come here and stay here.
I grew up in a small town in southern Minnesota, and rural areas today struggle with the wives just plain want to be in a big metro area. How do you guys in the packaging industry, how have you tapped that to get the people when the wife said, I want to stay in Minneapolis or I want to stay in Des Moines or Fargo?
Well, when I first moved to Alexandria, my wife is from Minneapolis.
Oh, okay.
And I think it took, maybe a couple of years, but when she'd been here a little while, she would not leave. And yeah, if you're looking for the things that a big city can offer, this may not be the place. Yet, Twin Cities is only two and a half hours away. Now, if you want to be in New York or Chicago, yeah, we can't find that. But we're looking for the people that really, this is the life they want to live. People like fishing, hunting, activities, outdoor activities. If they like Four Seasons, this is a good place to live.
I know a number of your competitors, and I could flip off some names, but from a standpoint of education-wise, I know some of your industry and some of the other industry, when we were looking at building a new high school or changes in the vocational school, what about education to help this industry? With the new school and some changes at the tech school, is education responding to the needs of the packaging industry in Alexandria now, you think, better than before? Are you getting, does it look like this first class that is going to graduate with 4 years under the new academy system? You think you're going to get better local people, you think?
Well, I think so, and I think one of the things that I would say we all would like to be able to take graduates that graduate from the tech college, in that they would stay here, particularly if they fit this industry. And if I were to take a survey of all of our employees, it's a high percentage that have gone through our tech college.
Okay.
And I think our tech college and our high school, they're focusing much more on trade. And I have this conversation with my son-in-law, who is a teacher. And, I think quite a few years ago, the feeling is everybody's got to go to college. Mm-hmm. I think today they're saying, let's find a trade that they're really connected with. And not everybody should go to college. The ones that should, and the ones that aren't college student should find a trade that fits them. So yeah, I'm very happy with the focus of our new school, our new high school, and also a continued tech school to continue to focus on what our needs are. So I would say that relationship has been really great.
Is the engineering industry or the college that turns out the guys that can stamp the paper or make the biggest companies that you deal with or globally, it has that kind of been taken care of now, and your focus is more on people that actually can turn out this slick little machine or slick machine, some of these that do what you need to do. Any thought that way?
Well, I'm not sure I fully got your question, but we're not going to find all the right people in Alexandria.
Sure.
We're not going to find all the right people that come out of a tech college. We're not going to find all the right people that graduate from the University of Minnesota or North Dakota or wherever. But hiring the right person for the right job, and early on, I would say probably in the first 4 to 5 years of Douglas's existence, we might have had one degreed engineer. But I would say today we have lots of degreed engineer, but also it's experience too. And I think another thing, if you look at the average age of our employees, it's probably been pretty good, because you think, being as old as we are, we have all old people, but we've been able to grow so that our average age is probably still right around 40 or early 40s.
Okay.
That means we're hiring quite a few in their 20s, and probably not a lot of them that are in their 50s.
And from a standpoint then of back to kind of time is running down for you, and been very kind with your time, and the people that watch this as well as myself will say thank you, Vern. Give us some kind of closing thoughts or something that I've missed that you say, why hasn't this guy asked me this, either about Douglas Machine or the industry?
Well, I'm sure I'll think of a lot of things because as I think about my journey and the packaging journey, surely my personal journey has been a exciting journey, not without frustration and challenges, but I guess I learned more in the difficulties that I did in the good times. But I guess one I think that I would suggest you might want to talk to, that's my brother Paul.
Okay.
He actually started in the packaging industry before I did in the Minneapolis area, and maybe a little bit of his journey, how he got into the packaging industry. And then of course I ended up working for that company in the Twin Cities, but I wanted to live in rural Minnesota, and I wanted to figure out how to get back up here.
But he eventually came out here,
He came up about 3 years later.
Okay.
Kiddingly, we always say that he wasn't willing to take a risk, and I was.
Sure, and that's a big part of it, isn't it?
And so he wanted to make sure that the company would exist before he came. But I think early on, then of course there was 3 equal owners, and when he came, we kind of divided our duties. He took over the sales and marketing,
Okay.
and I took over the manufacturing, and my cousin took over the engineering. And that's how we kind of divided earlier. And of course, as the company grew, of course, things changed. And later on, we acquired several different companies. And my cousin, he said, I'd like to get the smaller company again and grow it on my own. So we spun off one of the companies, Palmer Industries, which of course today is Gardner Bender, right down the street here.
Okay.
And he took that over and was able to grow that, and of course sold it some years ago to Gardner Bender.
So in whatever time you're kind enough to give us, you became the welder guy, the bend guy, we got to hand something with some electricity on this, we got to have a stop here that kicks it right and the other one kicks it up. Tell us about how you developed as an engineer without an engineering degree.
Well, I suppose, I'm not sure where that really starts. As a young child going to a little country school, I thought I was going to be a carpenter and be building houses and designing houses.
Okay.
Well, as time went on, I guess that never did happen. But when I went to work for this company in Minneapolis, very few drawings were actually made of the machine we were going to build, and it would be just basically a drawing of the frame, and you kind of knew what you had to do. So it allowed us to be really creative and come up with ideas of putting into this piece of equipment. So, as I said earlier on, working on this little collating project in my garage in the Twin Cities, I was trying to be creative in ways I thought we could make this collating a piece of equipment. And so when Douglas got started, that was kind of the same way. We would figure out approximately how big we thought this machine would have to be, and then from that point on, we'd just go make the parts, draw a hand sketch on a piece of paper, and make them. Well, as time went on, of course, we'd save these sketches and put them in a little box, and eventually we started making more and more drawings. And as I look back at it today, there's nothing that's really made here anymore that isn't been designed and drawn up on a SolidWorks.
What about that garage in Minneapolis? Because I think the packaging industry in general and your competitors have probably all got some background that way. What did your garage look like when you started doing this stuff? Did you just have a vise and a hammer and a hacksaw, or were you one of the first guys that had a welder in your suburban area or wherever you lived?
Well, I surely didn't have a lot of stuff. My brother had a lathe. I think I had a drill press.
Okay.
And then when other parts had to be made with it, I'd have to bring them someplace to get them made.
So you had to find a welder. You're not a welder by trade, or?
No, I mean I can weld, but
Okay.
I'm not a welder by trade. When I went through high school, I took a machine shop course.
Okay, tell us about that a little bit about, and that was in Alexandria, at the old school by downtown, or were you part of the new Jefferson system?
Well,
in those days.
The first course I took was in the old Central School.
Okay.
And then my junior and senior year I was in Jefferson.
Okay.
And had a machine shop there. And surely I can remember building a number of things in the machine shop. Actually, I built a drill press out of that machine shop. And so I think that got me interested in being a machinist. So when I moved to the Twin Cities, ended up getting a job where at that point we did not separate machinists from assemblers or from electricians. Everybody did everything. And so you'd machine parts, then you got to put them on and see if they fit. And of course, as time changed, eventually there's a machine shop, there's an electrical department, there's an assembly department, and so on.
When you say back to you, because we always want to encourage our young people to flex. When you built your own drill press, whatever happened to that?
I still got it.
And do you still use it in your garage once in a while?
No, I don't. I got a better one.
What about family then? Do you have any grandsons or granddaughters involved in the business, or?
My youngest son is an engineer designer.
Here.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually works in the R&D department today. But my other children do not. My oldest son is a salesman for a company called Zepp. My daughter lives down by Belgrade, is married to a teacher that teaches HCGC.
Okay. Okay. And from my looking at time, we're chewing up that hour pretty fast. I think my little timer here's got about 5 minutes. Give me some thoughts of what you recommend to innovative men or women, boys or girls out there, that boy, you're glad you took that leap, and your relationship to people, whether it's your competitors or people in the community or a customer. Tell us about your ideology, your philosophy, or your success in that range of getting along with your fellow man to make you successful, Vern.
Well, I think when we're recognizing that we can't do it by ourselves. And I think if we recognize that we need people around us, because we're not good at everything. But I guess there's a few other things that probably are really important as I think about it. One is surely honesty, and I think how we treat one another. I guess I would say that even though I'm surely I've had a lot to learn and probably still learning, but if we recognize that we're not better than someone else, and many of our people at Douglas have gone through servant leadership roundtable, which how do you serve one another, and I think if the manager or the owner comes across as being better than someone else, I think you got to be at the same level, and we're all here for a purpose to serve one another, and I guess I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wouldn't be for the people around me, and hopefully I can be a servant to them and an encouragement to others around me.
We're going to close with probably a strange question people may think, as well as yourself. What about government today? Is government being flexible enough for this packaging industry in Alexandria? Are they understanding the challenges, the tax code and whatever? Are you at least neutral on government from your industry standpoint?
Well, I think we can get very frustrated with government, or we can learn to try to do our best to put up with government. And I think you can spend a lot of energy trying to change some things that you can't change.
Mm-hmm.
So how do we best cope with the things that are out there? And surely, like it says, choose your battles or you'll lose the war.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are times where you have to choose that battle. And but you can spend a lot of time losing your focus if you're just trying to fight every battle. Also, I'm very excited that we're an ESOP company today.
Yes.
And it was a long journey to get there, and that could be a story all by itself of the journey from being privately owned to being publicly traded to buying the business back with the help of an equity partner to forming an ESOP. And I think that was a fairly long journey, but I guess I would say that, maybe put it this way, I believe that all of us are on this earth for purpose, or can be, and I believe that God, first of all, entrusted me enough with Douglas to operate Douglas, and after we had sold Douglas back in 1986, end of 1986, several years later, began to recognize that the corporation that had bought Douglas did not have the values that were dear to me and were really important to me. And that was a journey to say, how do we buy Douglas back? And the journey to buy it back, of course, took quite a while, and that's a long story by itself that would take a lot longer to go into. But I remember as I praying about that, I said, God, give me a second chance. And if you give us a second chance, I will do my best to operate this, because I came with nothing, I'm living with nothing.
Amen.
And so how can I best serve you with what I've been entrusted with? And through that whole process, God gave us the opportunity to buy the business back. And with that in mind, eventually it was to become an ESOP company, because it wasn't Vern or my brother or my cousin that's so smart, but our employees that are part of this business, and how can we allow them to be a part of it and be a stakeholder? And so today, being an ESOP company, I'm extremely proud of, extremely happy for, because not only does it create a retirement tool for these employees, but it also feels like they have an ownership in this business. So they're working to make Douglas successful, and they're feeling like they have a part of doing that. And at the time they choose to retire, they will be well rewarded with that as well. So there's surely laws that that as an ESOP company that we would, I guess, so to speak, fight with the government to make sure that they stay in effect, so that the dollars that would normally go to paying taxes, we can use to reinvest in the business and also become retirement dollars for those that retire.